81-49 going into the fourth quarter. I might as well put the controller down and just read the computer.
How do we feel about this, Rutledge? Any thoughts on your impending comeback?
You know, I love a good comeback story. D2 the Mighty Ducks is one of my favorites
Ooh, that's a good one. What about, would you consider Rudy a comeback story?
because he came back into the game.
Just like underdog, you know, against all odds, adversity, kind of that deal.
What team was Notre Dame beating up onto where Rudy got to play? I don't even remember.
Yeah, I want to say it was Navy. It was either Navy or Purdue. I believe it was one of those two teams.
Yeah, it was. I
No,
just
you know what? It
remember.
was Georgia Tech.
Was it Georgia?
100%.
That was back in the day when like Georgia Tech was a high level football program.
I am almost, but I am almost positive. I would put half of a Klondike bar, not eaten by me, on that it was Georgia Tech.
I just remember watching some college football movies as a kid, and it always seemed like Georgia Tech was the villain team. Like you had to beat Georgia Tech. I mean, that's because you
Well,
know,
Rutledge, that's because
in
you
the
were in
'90s,
Georgia.
in the late '90s, they were like, they were kind of good. I think they had a championship in '94 or in '90.
It was 90. Yep,
Yeah, and they used to wear blue jerseys at one point, which was way different.
like Navy.
And one year they wore jerseys that looked like honeycombs, which was way stupid.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that. That was a little bit off-brand for Georgia Tech. They could have worn jerseys that had microscopes on them.
They could have worn jerseys that had protractors on them.
Yeah, protractor. A telescope.
Maybe a
Uh,
leveler.
yeah, absolutely, not a honeycomb. But there is another team in Georgia that they just had their conference just had their media days this past week.
They did. And SEC Media Days came and went, and I think the big talk about SEC Media Days, well, there was one coach there that was super duper excited, and there was also some other talk about the conference. Connor, do you want to talk about coaches first, or do you want to talk about the conference overall first?
Oh, let's talk about coaches first.
So we all know that Coach Shane Beamer is new to the University of South Carolina, and it was him and LSU were together on the very same day, and they were a couple hours apart from when they were there. And it was quoted that someone said, "South Carolina's already here to Ed Ogeron," and Ed Ogeron's response was, "It's because he's excited." So, and I won't say this as a Gamecock bias, but it's really exciting to see a coach. When you had Mike Leach last year, Lane Kiffin both come into the conference, and then have a coach who's in their first year coaching job taking over a very hard job to take over that's not in a good spot. Um, it's good to see a coach come into the conference with this just sort of tenacity of, yeah, I'm going to win games here because that's what we're here to do. So, what did you think of Beamer's approach to SEC Media Days, Connor?
You know, in some ways, you got it's almost like not almost, it's definitely like a recruiting piece, right? You've texted some recruits saying, hey, uh, check it out. I'm going to be talking a lot about the program here. Would love to have you come see, hear what I have to say, and here's how you can watch me. So a program like South Carolina that needs a lot of help, needs a lot of good quality players. I think Shane Beamer needs every little thing that he can do to help make sure that he's getting good players, because ultimately that's what wins. Dudes win.
Just guys being dudes.
Guys being dudes. But yeah, so no, I think Shane Beamer as another great addition. Yeah, you're right, Rutledge. The SEC has a ton of not just quality coaches, obviously Coach Saban, down there in Tuscaloosa doing his thing, but they also have a lot of really fun personalities between Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin, especially both in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, it's I really like that rivalry. We'll see how that thing produces now they've had time with their program together. for both of them and coming out of non-COVID year. It will also be who is the new coach at Auburn? I can't remember his name.
He was like an old Baylor guy, if I'm not mistaken. I think,
Yes.
I actually had dinner with a friend the other night who was potentially going to be on that Auburn staff.
Okay.
And, pardon me?
I said okay. That's
Yeah.
exciting. I also had dinner.
And, we were talking about Auburn just as a program. And, what's interesting about Auburn is I always feel like Auburn as a program tries to force it. They'll force it by going outside of the box, right? Yeah, the Gene Chizik hire that ended up going really well for them because they won a national championship. But that's because Gene Chizik also knew how to get the right recruiter in to make sure he got Cam Newton and have Gus Malzahn on the roster, on their coaching staff as well to coach Cam Newton. So, it's fun when Auburn is at least decent, right? Because just to have a couple wild games each year that Auburn's going to go beat play a really good LSU team right to the very end. I think that's always a fun thing, but I'm not expecting a ton from Auburn this year for sure.
I'm also not either. I don't have them very high. I think they're going to hit a little bit of a lull. Ever since, and it was so strange to watch that championship team after Gene Chizik had them and then see them fall apart so hard. But just proof that you have to have so many things right in order to win. I think also something interesting with the state of the SEC was that um, Commissioner Skanke came out and he had a big conversation about they're going to try to change the way they schedule the SEC. In that, if you're not someone familiar with the Southeastern Conference, there are some big marquee games that get held every single year as like tradition. Because to them, it just means more. Some of those games are Georgia and Auburn, which if you're not a big college football historian, is a very old rivalry because they had some of the first teams to play each other in the South. LSU and Florida, Alabama and Tennessee, just to name a few games. And these are games that are an East versus a West opponent. What's happening though, and I'll use Alabama Tennessee as a good example, is that that game has become very, very, very one-sided, just like this game is.
I,
So the commissioner is talking about rotating and getting something like a Georgia Texas A&M game on the schedule a little bit more, or maybe even you would see, I don't know, give me another example. You would see even a more evenly matched game, such as an Arkansas versus South Carolina. So get that kind of rotating schedule, Connor. How do you feel about breaking that tradition of those quasi not rivalry games?
I it's really hard, right? Because you have just that as you nailed right on the head there, and I was so close to scoring over 100 points against you, and I appreciate you giving the long take there. No, I think you've got there's the fans in Knoxville, Tennessee that might be sad that you might not get to play Alabama every year, but you know what? That's not getting eyeballs on the screen, right? We need to make sure Alabama's playing Georgia more. We need to make sure that the marquee teams are getting their fair shot cross divisionally because this is one of the things that I talk about a lot in the SEC. Like it's not all created equal, right? Vanderbilt does exist in the SEC. The Missouri does exist in the SEC, even though most people forget that it does exist in the SEC. There are those teams that just, uh, maybe there's a better TV rating to be had by not having Alabama go play Missouri or Texas A&M go to Vanderbilt. So no, I definitely get that, and I think that it's an eye on the TV situation.
It definitely is, especially putting a good game on the SEC network on ESPN or even CBS. It'll also help boost their playoff shot because the SEC has been kind of on the fringe the past couple years of getting two teams in the playoff or having a good convincing. It's always a held back argument. If they toughen up their schedules, it won't be as tough of an argument to continually put two SEC teams in the playoff, even as the playoff starts to expand.
Yeah, or
So
3 or 4 with a 12-team playoff. I wouldn't be surprised if in that 12-team playoff, year one there is a conversation of putting the top 4 SEC teams in there, depending on how the selection happens.
absolutely, and I think that's them and the four that at least I could name that I could see the SEC trying to push for, even though it doesn't work like this, would be Alabama, Georgia, Florida, and then LSU. How do you get all four of them in the playoff and not make it look weird like when the Big Ten put Ohio State in the playoff?
Yeah, the Big Ten changed the rules to put Ohio State in the playoff. That was wild.
That was wild. It
Ha!
happened.
That it did.
Well,
That it
our
did.
show
Well, look
happened,
at we
Connor.
got. I heard a great nickname for Robin Lopez, and you being a Simpsons fan, Rutledge, I hope you appreciate it. Sideshow Rob.
I like that. I like that a lot. That was good.